Then it really hit me. I'm on the moon. I'm on the moon. And the excitement, the wonder, the thrill, the adventure of it all.
12 humans have walked on the moon. 12. And the last one left in December 1972. Over 50 years ago. We built rockets taller than skyscrapers, strapped brave men to controlled explosions, and sent them 250,000 miles into the void. We did it 6 times, then we stopped. No base, no return, just silence. Now, at 89 years old, Charles Duke, the 10th man to ever stand on the lunar surface, the very voice who talked Neil Armstrong down to Tranquility Base, is finally speaking. And what he's saying is shaking the space community to its core. Who is Charles Duke? The weight behind the words. Before we dive into what Charles Duke has said, we need to understand who he is, because his credibility is what makes this conversation so significant. Charles Moss Duke Jr. was born on October 3, 1935. He is a former NASA astronaut, a United States Air Force officer, and a test pilot. In 1972, he served as the lunar module pilot for Apollo 16. He became the 10th person and the youngest person to walk on the moon at just 36 years old. Today, he is one of only 4 moonwalkers still alive, along with David Scott, Buzz Aldrin, and Harrison Schmitt. Duke's connection to the moon started before Apollo 16. In 1969, he served as the capsule communicator, Capcom, for Apollo 11. This mission was the first crewed moon landing. His southern drawl was familiar to many as he spoke to the Apollo 11 crew. His first words to them on the moon were, "Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot." Duke's voice was a key part of this historic moment. Now at 89 years old, he is raising questions about what seems off. People need to listen carefully to him. Duke has a strong background. As Capcom during the Apollo 11 landing, he helped guide Neil Armstrong to the moon. Later, as a lunar module pilot, he saw the moon for himself. He has often talked about his passion for space. He said, "I volunteered for the love of exploration, the love of flight, the adventure of spaceflight. I was fortunate to be one of the 12 men to walk on the moon. It was a great honor and privilege." Recently, Duke has started to speak more openly. He has mostly followed the official NASA story for years. Now he is asking why we have not returned to the moon. Duke is not just a random person speaking out. He is a respected Air Force Brigadier General and NASA astronaut who was part of the first lunar landing. When someone with his experience suggests that we found things we didn't understand, many people pay attention. That is why millions are listening to him now. The official story, budget, politics, and the end of the space race. To understand why Charles Duke's statements matter, you need to know why we never returned to the moon. The official explanation seems simple, but it raises more questions upon closer look. For decades, the main reasons given for not returning to the moon have included budget cuts, changes in political priorities, and the end of the Cold War space race. First, let's talk about money. NASA's budget couldn't support more Apollo missions, which cost about $445 million each, around $2.73 billion today, while also developing the space shuttle. The last funding for Apollo was in 1973. However, budget cuts started much earlier, not just after Apollo 17. During budget discussions in December 1969, a top aide to President Richard Nixon told NASA he didn't have enough money for the next few years and would have to limit activities. Nixon didn't see the need to go to the moon 6 more times. Nixon's decision was crucial. With no comparable political support for more moon missions, Nixon chose the space shuttle in 1972 as the way to keep NASA going. By the 1970s, NASA's budget had less purchasing power than in the 1960s. Next is the political context, particularly the Cold War. The intense competition that drove the Apollo program faded as the US and the Soviet Union began to get along better. After America landed on the moon first, the main reason for the race disappeared. The key factor in Apollo's decline was the easing of tensions between the US and the Soviet Union. In 1961, the US was behind in space exploration, but by the early 1970s, the focus had changed. Public opinion also shifted. Americans began to care more about issues like civil unrest, the Vietnam War, struggling cities, and inflation. Apollo became less exciting as repeated moon landings lost their thrill. However, critics, including Charles Duke, argue that budget cuts and boredom alone did not end this significant exploration program. In 1970, the U.S. chose to step back from exploring the moon and beyond. The term retreat used by NASA historians is noteworthy. Countries usually don't retreat from winning situations unless something significant changes. That significant change is what Charles Duke has discussed carefully over the years. Apollo 16 and the Descartes Highlands, what they found. Apollo 16 aimed to study the moon's geology. The main goal was clear: land in the Descartes Highlands, collect rocks, and show that ancient volcanic activity formed the lunar highlands. Apollo 16 was the 10th crewed mission in the U.S. Apollo program and the 5th to land on the moon. It was the second of Apollo's J missions, which involved a longer stay on the lunar surface, a focus on science, and the use of the lunar roving vehicle. Astronauts Charlie Duke and John Young landed at the Descartes Highlands and completed 3 spacewalks. This area is the highest region on the moon's near side and was thought to be volcanic and mostly composed of basalt, based on the gray tones seen from Earth. During their over 71-hour stay, Duke spent 20 hours and 15 minutes outside the spacecraft. He and Young set up scientific equipment, collected nearly 97 kilograms of rock and soil samples, and tested the lunar roving vehicle on the roughest surface they had encountered on the moon. The mission was officially considered a success, but it also yielded a surprising discovery. While Apollo 16 did not find the ancient volcanic rocks scientists expected, this result proved even more valuable. The breccias they collected showed that geologists had underestimated the role of meteorite impacts in shaping the highlands, and volcanic activity was less common than they thought in these areas. This scientific finding challenged the mission's assumptions. What they uncovered was not what anyone predicted. Duke described his feelings on the moon as a mix of emotions. When he stepped onto the surface, he thought, "I'm really here. I'm finally on the moon." He felt a sense of wonder and awe at the beauty and desolation of the moon, echoing Buzz Aldrin's phrase, "magnificent desolation." However, magnificent desolation has a double meaning. Reports among researchers and former aerospace workers suggest that the last Apollo missions encountered strange features, geometric shapes, odd reflections, and radio interference that did not have easy explanations. NASA described these as optical illusions or natural formations, but some astronauts were not convinced. While Duke has not openly claimed to have seen alien structures or extraterrestrial life, some researchers highlight his comments about unusual formations in lunar photos. This has sparked online conspiracy theories about hidden NASA secrets. What matters most is not whether you believe in the more extraordinary stories. What is important is that a man who spent 71 hours on the moon, gathered hundreds of pounds of moon rocks, and saw the landscape with his own eyes, is now carefully choosing his words about the moon, the canceled missions, and the sudden stop. NASA's story about the end of the Apollo program is strange. It wasn't a smooth shutdown, it was sudden and messy. This is surprising given that humanity was making great progress in space exploration. When Apollo 11 landed on the moon in July 1969, NASA had plans for 9 more missions, including Apollo 20, set for December 1972. However, one by one, those missions were canceled. Some reasons for the cancellations included changes in technical plans, the Apollo 1 fire, the Apollo 13 incident, hardware delays, and budget cuts. Apollo 20 was the first to be canceled in January 1970. NASA says the last 3 Apollo missions were canceled mainly due to budget problems. They state that all 3 missions were originally planned, but they had to pull back because of costs. However, there is a timing issue. Apollo 13's incident occurred in April 1970, but Apollo 20 was canceled earlier in January. This raises questions about the claim that Apollo 13's challenges were the reason for the other cancellations. President Nixon wanted to reduce risks with the moon landings. NASA agreed to some of the cancellations to fund the new space shuttle program. Even in the official explanation, there are contradictions and unclear motivations. The bigger question remains, why didn't we try to return to the moon for over 50 years after we knew how to get there? In 1969, we figured out how to reach the moon with technology less advanced than today's smartphones. We completed 6 lunar missions before stopping. When you think about it, that generation of space explorers left us wondering why they chose to stop. Some suggest that the discoveries made during those missions created uncertainty or posed risks. Instead of facing these issues openly, decision-makers may have preferred to step back. Astronauts such as Charles Duke and Edgar Mitchell reported strange, unexplained phenomena during their missions. Buzz Aldrin also spoke about unusual objects seen on Apollo 11. What is striking is that these statements came from highly trained individuals, including military officers, test pilots, and engineers. As they grew older and moved away from institutional pressures, many of them started making similar, carefully chosen comments about the moon. Charles Duke, now 89, may be the most important voice among them. The silence of the moonwalkers and what it means. One of the most striking parts of the time after the Apollo missions isn't what the astronauts said, but what they didn't say, and how long they stayed silent. The Apollo astronauts became some of the most famous people in the world after their missions. They had the opportunity to write books, give lectures, and share every detail of their experiences on the moon. Some did, but many remained quiet about the deeper questions. Those who spoke later in life chose their words carefully, being suggestive but not definitive. A powerful image is of the surviving moonwalkers gathering in 2017. Older men in their 80s finally revealing truths they felt they had to keep quiet for decades. Buzz Aldrin, Edgar Mitchell, and Al Worden, all decorated military officers and PhDs, reached the same conclusion. The official story is not the whole truth. They stayed silent because the system required it. We should approach these statements with skepticism. Claiming that the official record is a work of fiction is a serious allegation that needs strong evidence. However, the agreement among multiple credible individuals is worth examining. Conspiracy researchers suggest that Charles Duke's recent comments hint at truths he now feels safe to share. His comments have sparked new discussions about what NASA may still be hiding. Historically, there is a pattern of governments and institutions withholding information. The Cold War, in particular, was marked by secrecy surrounding space activities. Both the American and Soviet space programs kept many details classified. Just because something has an official explanation doesn't mean it tells the full story. Supporters argue that astronauts, bound by national security agreements during the Cold War, may have avoided discussing unusual observations in detail. What makes Charles Duke's viewpoint important is his unique background. He wasn't just an astronaut. He was the Capcom for Apollo 11, which means he listened to all the communications from the moon, not just what was made public. He walked on the moon and later became a brigadier general. He spent years in the military and aerospace fields. If anyone understands what really happened, it's Charles Duke. His words in his late 80s deserve serious attention. They should not be dismissed, as he has earned the right to share his observations. When someone of his experience suggests that we found things we didn't understand, it captures the world's attention differently. The question isn't whether to believe him without question. The real question is why we have felt comfortable for so long not asking these important questions. The return to the moon, Artemis, and the new space race. After over 50 years of being quiet, humanity is finally going back to the moon. And understanding why now and what has changed is important context for everything Charles Duke has been saying. Before Artemis II, humans had not left Earth's orbit since Apollo 17 returned from the moon in 1972. NASA has been trying to change that since 2004, when President George W. Bush announced the vision for space exploration. This plan aimed to send humans back to the moon and eventually to Mars. The Artemis program succeeded in returning humans to the vicinity of the moon. Artemis II launched on April 1, 2026, with astronauts Christina Koch, Victor Glover, Reed Wiseman, and Jeremy Hansen on board their Orion capsule named Integrity. This marked the first time humans had gone beyond low Earth orbit since 1972. However, actually landing on the moon will still take some years. NASA aims for the first Artemis lunar landing in early 2028. Artemis IV is tentatively scheduled for 2028 and will be a major milestone. This mission will land near the moon's South Pole, an area that humans have never visited before. Why target the South Pole? This region is much colder, increasing the chances of finding frozen water. It is also near the Aitken Basin, the largest impact crater in our solar system, which reaches deep into the moon's crust. NASA cites the search for water ice, ancient rock, and other scientific treasures as reasons for the exploration. But there is also a geopolitical reason. Winning the moon race during the Cold War was about national security, and similar motivations exist today. China and Russia are both pursuing strong lunar programs, launching a second space race. In December 2025, President Trump issued an executive order focusing on ensuring American space superiority. This order includes plans for a permanent lunar outpost by 2030 and developing a nuclear reactor for the moon's surface. Plans include a permanent outpost and crewed landings every 6 months. The goals are ambitious and urgent. This makes Charles Duke's statements even more significant. As humanity prepares to return to the moon for the first time in over 50 years, Duke, who walked on the moon as part of Apollo 16, is speaking more openly about what he found and what was left behind. Whether you see this as a coincidence, conscience, or planned disclosure, it is hard to ignore. After 52 years of silence and explanations that satisfy some but not all, we have to ask, why did we, a species eager for exploration, stop going to the only other world we had touched? Charles Duke may not have all the answers, but he has something rare. He was there. He stood on the moon, walked away from it, and now at the end of his remarkable life, he's talking. The real question is not what he saw, but whether we dare to listen. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe we were told the whole truth about Apollo? Let us know below.